Hello, my name is Mason Mazzella, and today I'll be talking about white blood cell production. Our body is constantly making new blood cells. Billions of red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets are produced every day to replace older cells that die during normal processes or illness. The process which white blood cells are made is called hematopoiesis. Blood cells, including white blood cells, are created in the bone marrow, which is a soft, spongy material in the center of the bone. Approximately 10 billion new myeloid stem cells, which is all blood cells except lymphocytes, are produced each day. Although the liver and spleen produce blood cells during gestation from about 6 weeks to 7 months, the bone marrow is the only place production can occur in adults and children. Blood cells are created from a group of master cells called stem cells that also live in the bone marrow. These stem cells have the ability to divide and produce all the different types of blood cells. The white blood cells are an important part of our body's immune system. White blood cells are divided into two categories: granulocytes and agranulocytes. Granulocytes have visible granules and are divided into three different types: basophils, eosinophils, and neutrophils. Agranulocytes have harder to see vesicles and have two types: lymphocytes and monocytes, which also have B and T cells. Granulocytes and monocytes are nonspecific defense cells attacking pretty much all pathogens, while lymphocytes are specific to one particular pathogen. Generally, white blood cells do not spend much of their lifetime in the bloodstream. They use it to get from one organ to another to find the pathogen. Granulocytes have a lifespan of about 7 hours. Neutrophils account for 70% of the circulating white blood cells. They have a very dense segmented nucleus with 2 to 5 lobes. They are often the first white blood cells to arrive at the scene of an infection and will attack the substance that has been marked by a complement. They will engulf the bacteria and ingest it. Neutrophils only last 10 hours in the bloodstream. They will only last 30 minutes while actively engulfing bacteria. The neutrophils will die after engulfing about 25 bacteria. Next is eosinophils. They account for 2 to 4% of the circulating white blood cells. They are similar in size to neutrophils but always have a bilobed nucleus and are deep red, obviously being granules. They attack pathogens that have been marked by antibodies. They are capable of engulfing bacteria, but their main attack is through the release of toxin compounds. Thus, they are particularly useful against multicellular parasites. These are the cells responsible for an allergic reaction because they are sensitive to allergens. Basophils have loads of granules and stain very darkly with the various dyes. They are slightly smaller than eosinophils and neutrophils. They account for less than 1% of circulating white blood cells. They migrate to inflamed areas where they discharge their granules, releasing heparin and histamine into the interstitial space. They enhance the local inflammation that has already been started by mast cells. Next, we have lymphocytes that are slightly larger than red blood cells and do not generally contain visible granules. They generally have a large round nucleus. They account for 20 to 30% of the circulating white blood cells. They migrate from the blood to the peripheral tissues and are able to migrate back into the blood. They fight against viruses, and there's 3 different types: T cells, B cells, and natural killer cells. Finally, we have monocytes. They are spherical and larger than neutrophils and eosinophils and approximately twice as big as basophils. The nucleus is large and tends to be oval or kidney bean shaped. They account for 2 to 8% of circulating white blood cells. They use the blood mainly for transportation and remain in the blood only for a maximum of 24 hours before migrating to tissues to become macrophages. A monoblast is an immature cell that develops into a monocyte. All white blood cells except lymphocytes will mature in the bone marrow. Hemocytoblasts will develop directly into lymphoid stem cells, which are distinctly different from the progenitor cells that go on to form all the other types of blood cells. The thymus produces various factors that affect the differentiation of lymphocytes that also develop in the response to the presence of various antigens. The hemocytoblast, in the presence of multi-CSF, will develop into a progenitor cell. These cells will go on to form all types of blood cells except lymphocytes. Neutrophil development in the bone marrow takes approximately 10 days. Mature neutrophils are released into the blood and only survive for 3 to 6 hours. Because mature neutrophils are so short-lived in the bone marrow, it constantly produces large numbers of neutrophils to meet the body's needs. Production of white blood cells. Lymphoblast is an abnormal cell resembling a large lymphocyte produced in large numbers in a form of leukemia. If someone has leukemia, their body is going to produce more lymphoblasts. Blast cells, a primitive undifferentiated blood cell often found in the blood of those with acute leukemia, meaning newly produced. Our body makes natural proteins that can signal the stem cell to start making cells that will eventually develop as neutrophils. One of these important proteins is this process that is called granulocyte colony stimulating factor, or GCSF. The GCSF protein can work on the cell and the bone marrow that eventually becomes neutrophils and signal that they should start becoming neutrophils. The entire process in which stem cells develop into mature neutrophils can take about 10 days and includes 2 phases. During the first phase, stem cells and their offsprings can divide as they develop and mature. This step takes about 6 days. Then, another 4 to 5 days, the cells mature further and the cells can no longer divide. The mature neutrophils are finally released into the blood where they can fight bacteria and protect the body from infection. Band cells or band neutrophils are those that have unsegmented nuclei. This is the developmental stage of the neutrophil immediately preceding the mature segmented form. An increased proportion of bands in the peripheral bonds is often referred to as a left shift. That may indicate the presence of infection, but is not particularly reliable in this regard, as other macrophages may produce the same effect.